Troy, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, and welcome to our show.
Hey, Richard. Thanks for having me. Troy Balding. I'm active duty Navy. I was born in Japan. My dad was also in the Navy. I'm married to my beautiful wife, Chrissy. We've got two boys, Kai and Hunter. A lieutenant commander on the P-8. I'm a naval flight officer, so I'm the tactical coordinator on the P-8.
Wow, that sounds exciting. Have you always wanted to be in aviation?
I have. So I went to school at the University of Central Florida. Kind of took a long route getting through there. As I was coming up to my last year, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And then I really started thinking about it. And I was like, man, I would really love to fly airplanes. So I started looking into different ways to do it and ended up going with the military route.
Wow. Well, I have to ask, because everyone wants to know, how realistic is the latest Top Gun?
It's got its moments. It's good though. It's fun to watch.
Did a pretty good job there making it exciting. So it's really an honor to have you on here, and thank you for agreeing to share your story. As you know, we started our foundation to create a resource for others that are maybe going through a journey, cancer, and wanting to know some tips. And take us back to when you first found out. Where were you? What happened? What caused you to go see the doctor?
Yeah, so I was actually on deployment. I was out in the Middle East, started having some issues, brought it up to our flight surgeon, and we initially just kind of hawked it up to change in diet and stress level. Obviously, when we're deployed, the stress level is much higher. Also, during that same time, my youngest son, he was born about little over 2 months early, so I knew that was stressful for the wife. I was lucky enough to get to come home and help out for a little bit, but then had to get back on the road again to be out there with the squadron. So we knew the stress level for what was happening at home was high. We knew the stress level out there on deployment was high. I was out there in the Middle East eating food that I normally wouldn't be eating. So we just kind of hawked it up to, the stress and diet. After returning home, I continued to have those same issues and nothing was clearing up. I was having more bowel movements than normal, and it was starting to get to a point where it was painful to go as well. So I pressed on our flight doc. I was like, hey, I'm still having these issues. So he's like, all right, I'll get you to see a specialist. I'll have you go see GI out in town. Started looking for one of the GI specialists, and the one that I was being referred to gave me an appointment, but it was going to be 3 months out. They put me on the waiting list, and it just got to the point where probably about a month after initially waiting, the pain just got excruciating. My wife, Chrissy, she got to the point where she was like, you can't continue to wait for 2 more months to see somebody about this. Like, this is getting bad. Me just trying to push through, I was just like, well, I'll get to that appointment at some point. But she, being the advocate that she is, she called around and happened to find a cancellation for the very next day over at Borland and Groover here in Jacksonville. I went and saw Dr. Combe there, and we kind of talked through it. And he's like, well, this was on a Thursday, and he's like, I happen to have a cancellation for a colonoscopy on Saturday. It's like, otherwise, I can try to get you something else. This was the Saturday before Father's Day, and I said, well, let's just go ahead and get it done. I want to find out what's going on with me. I'm here. Let's just do this. Go in on Saturday. They got all the prep. Did all my prep on Friday. Went in on Saturday first thing, and then we were done before lunchtime. They said, hey, Dr. Combe wants to talk to you before you get going. He immediately started talking through what he saw. He told me right then, he was like, I've seen this before. This is cancer. He showed me all the pictures and everything. At that point, I think I kind of went into an initial bit of shock, and then I think probably straight into denial, because I immediately said, well, told him, I was like, well, we don't really know that it's cancer, right? Because we haven't got the biopsy back yet. And he's like, I've been doing this for a really long time, and I wouldn't tell you this if I wasn't sure. think I went in, like I said, I went into a state of denial, and I just couldn't believe that it was happening. Unfortunately, cancer runs in my family on my dad's side. I had assumed that I would end up with cancer at some point in my life, but wouldn't have expected to have it this early. I wasn't even 40 yet at the time. So at that point, I called up my flight doc because he told me to give him a call if anything crazy happened with the colonoscopy. He was gracious enough to answer my phone call and couldn't believe what I had to tell him. I think he was just as surprised as I was. But the care team that I have there with the Navy, they got me going. First thing on Monday, when I was back at work, I started getting all these phone calls from the local staff there, as well as getting phone calls from MD Anderson to come in and start talking with them. I continued on with seeing MD Anderson, and there at MD Anderson had me see Dr. Landman initially, and he went in and took another biopsy, and then also took a look around and scheduled me for all my scans, my CTs, my MRI. Ended up getting a port installed after they told me that I was going to end up having to do chemo. Had my port installed. They told me also that I would have to do radiation. So I did 5 rounds of chemo along with of infusion chemo along with oral chemo. Had about a month-long break. They did another CT scan of me to get me ready for radiation, and then did 28 rounds of radiation along with oral chemo throughout the throughout the radiation as well. During that whole process, I did end up in the hospital 2 times, once right around Christmas for a possible meningitis scare, one more time right around Valentine's Day for a possible C. diff scare. Luckily, I was negative for C. diff, and I didn't end up actually having meningitis, but they wanted to err on the safe side, so I ended up hospitalized. Just last week, I met with the care team again with Dr. Landman and his team, found out that I had a full clinical response to the treatment.
Wow. Congratulations. That is awesome.
I'm still in shock. That was the outcome at this point.
First of all, I have to say, what a journey you've been through. I have a few questions just thinking, how did you deal with all that? And, thank goodness you had Chrissy that got you in there. How much time from when you had the pain to when you got in? I know you had Chrissy call. How much time were you waiting there?
It was almost 4 months before, from the time I initially started talking to the flight surgeon after bringing it up to the point where I got the colonoscopy.
If you don't mind me asking, how young were you when you were diagnosed? And this just happened, right?
I just turned 39 when I started, and then here I am. I just turned 40 back in December of last year.
I had cancer in my family. Had you been told to get scanned early, or is it something that you knew you had to do, or?
Well, so my father had prostate cancer, but it was never really talked about as far as you should start getting scanned at an earlier time. Knowing what I know now, I'm going to tell my boys.
What would you say maybe your biggest challenge was?
Asking others for help, as well as accepting that help. It's okay to seek mental help. There's nothing in life that can really prepare you for this. So when you get to a point, it's okay to seek mental health.
I wish somebody would have told me that last year during my journey, and I appreciate that. Troy, what's something good that's come of this? If there's anything that's good, is there anything that comes to mind? You're like,
it's the little things that you really start to enjoy during this journey. I got to see my youngest start to take his first steps, running around like crazy now at this point. But
that is awesome. So I hear you have 2 boys, right?
Yes.
So your wife is outnumbered. Three boys. Okay. Yep. Were y'all able to talk it through? She's been a big support for you. How is she doing?
Absolutely. I had some really terrible thoughts and became really depressed and really anxious around the holidays. That was also the same time of year that my father passed away. He passed away from cancer. So, I kind of had a lot of those feelings come back. I had started to wonder if this would be my last holidays with the boys and my wife. I didn't know if I would be around another year or 5 years from now. And a lot of that takes a toll on you. And she helped me through that, and she was really the one that pushed me and advocated for me to seek mental help. I'd say more recently, I've kind of pushed her to seek mental help as well.
They're going through it the same time that you are. What are some things that you did to like take your mind off of it?
Initially, always worked out a few days a week, but I got into a routine of running. I got into a lot of holistic ways that I could change. So I changed a lot of ways that I could eat. One of the things my counselor told me about was meditation. Some of the other things I started working on was a journal.
A lot of people are going to be watching this and they may be just starting their journey. What tips would you give them to prepare for their doctor's appointments? I mean, what a great one right there, just writing down your questions.
Absolutely. I think that's a huge one, writing down your questions. I think the other thing is be your own advocate. Started doing a lot of research on my own time so that when I could go in, I would be as informed as I could be. The prep it's definitely not the most fun, but for the peace of mind, I think being uncomfortable for one evening, I would happily take that. The actual colonoscopy itself, I was asleep for, so it was some of the best sleep I had, and especially at the time we had a 1-year-old. I was like, man, I feel refreshed. The prep, I think a lot of people kind of say how bad it is. Is it fun? Absolutely not. Is it the worst thing that could happen? Definitely not.
It's hard to see on the outside what's going on the inside, and this screening is so important. Troy, if you had to do this all over again, which we don't want to do it all over again, but if you had to do it all over again, what's something that you wish you would have known or wish you would have done?
Wish I would have reached out earlier to others in this situation or that have been in this situation.
And that's one of the things that we want to make sure that when we're preparing people for this, if they find this site, hey, we've got people that have been there, done that. You don't have to walk through this the first time on your own. You can walk in the footsteps of others. Thank you for sharing, Troy, that, I know that was challenging going through that.
I want people to know that it's okay to go through, and feel the feelings that they're feeling. The internet can be a very slippery slope, if you will. You can go down the rabbit hole, and you can find all different things. You can find people out there that just want to take advantage of folks because they have cancer. And
you're right. There's all kinds of tips and tricks. And you mentioned earlier about being your own advocate. Does that mean not trust the doctor? Or does that mean question the doctor? And I mean, how do you be your own advocate? What do you mean by that?
It's okay to go in with a questioning attitude, but also understand that your doc is there to help you. They're not going to try to steer you wrong, but I think it's okay to ask the question, like, well, what is this that you want me to do? Or I think that's okay to bring that stuff in and ask the questions. At some point too, you need to be comfortable with your treatment team too. And if you're not comfortable with your treatment team, I would recommend seeking another team, through a second opinion. Have that care team that you trust.
Great advice. You're absolutely right about that. With your questions and then getting a second opinion. It sounds like you had a great team where your doctor didn't shut you down, but you had a plan if it did. Get a different team. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.